Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and of course, all of you being creatives and kind folk in the community, you're also co-hosts on this channel as we talk all things tabletop role-playing games. Now, as your host, I get to come up with the thesis, the subject matter, how we can focus our creative spark, and this time you guys are going to help me crowdsource a possible tabletop role playing game supplement. And we do that by what we always do here on the channel, and that is we talk creatively and openly as if we just played a game or about to play a tabletop role playing game, and we just get into a large discussion. And today, being Trope Tuesday, going back to our Monster Monday, and on Tuesday it's Trope Tuesday and World Building Wednesday, so on. On Trope Tuesday, we're going to talk about, well, the tropes of light and darkness. So we do have a document, and I thought we would talk uh, about the tropes of light and dark, and of course, light and dark kind of fits with good and evil in some ways, and breaking those tropes and then relating that to classic role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, and more. And so today, let's go through some of the tropes, and then let's see what it has to say. So over on TV Tropes. Matter of fact, you know what? I think I will actually share this. Let's see here. There we go. I'm going to bring up this document here, and let's take a look at it. Let's see what this looks like. Let's get the chat out of here so we can take a look at this. So light is not good, and this is the idea that because we are actively creating this framework, this toolkit that others are going to use for this post-apocalypse. It's I think is a cool idea to show like the light and goodness is not necessarily one and the same. And so under this concept, humanity might not be, or at least the earthly plane may not be the best place for a battle between good and evil, and that while light and heat and the sun does bring some life-giving nourishment, too much of anything is a terrible thing, and light may be the exact same thing. And so under TV tropes, the light seems like a good, kindly thing, especially compared to that bad old darkness. Whereas darkness is usually concerned with kicking puppies, eating children, and laughing its head off. The forces of light generally worry about nicer things like singing with the birds and helping little old ladies cross the street and, well, being a hero. But it can take a dark turn. In one of those instances where you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, the light isn't always what it appears to be. Anti-heroes usually fall under dark is not evil rather than this trope unless they're a Knight Templar. And this basically, of course, is TV tropes. You can go down. There's literally a memes about going down the rabbit hole of light is not necessarily good. For example, this trope is not about an obviously evil character, such as a bedsheet ghost. They may fall under bright is not good, or an angel wearing bright clothes with white magic, or school unicorn, as the villains are good examples. A corrupt church official, a white-haired, handsome youth simply using this to get away with misdeeds are examples. But we can go into some Dungeons and Dragons style of like how light might not be good, and I think we have some good ideas to do a little twist on this. Ooh, here we go. Come on, chat. So one idea to do a good twist on how so-called Dungeons and Dragons good things can be evil are let's take some basics like healing magic or light spells, or what are some other things? Guidance or resistance, or these are cantrips and spells in Dungeons and Dragons for clerics. Sanctuary, the command spell, zones of truth. All these things can be heavily twisted. For example, could you imagine, or rather, I can imagine, if we could go down the dark path here of individuals arrested by proctors or inquisitors and such, and being publicly flogged or tortured for their sins, and then having someone come up with their white robes and purity and healing their wounds just to be tortured all over again, making these individuals suffer over and over without having them killed, as their wounds are knit back together to only be flayed open again and again. Or maybe they have to atone for their sins and cause irreparable harm and damage, essentially uh, carving off a pound of flesh with a knife, a rusty knife for everyone to see, to have that flesh healed back and whatnot, and such. So I think that could be very dangerous, also, and pretty evil as well. A light itself can be used as a weapon. Having someone being forced to wear a headband or a sealed helm where the light spell is on the inside of it, and this person can't get a good night's sleep, having being forced to see the light and the truth in their eyes over and over again, even though everyone else is able to, even though you might be in a dark dungeon, the light itself is piercing even through your eyelids as you try to get sleep, depriving you of much needed rest. Also, light everywhere in a society, as we as society were able to harness light, we were able to we became a force multiplier. The longer you can work with light, especially bright enough light to do very delicate work like weaving and jewelry, carving of jewelry and things of that nature. Um, Once we became far greater force multipliers, we could get more work done. In a world with magic where light is everywhere. Come on, Kitty. Come on. Yeah, I know you're the producer. Come on. Yeah, come on. Come on, Sophie. Come on. I hear you. You are heard. You are seen. Sorry about that. Little off camera antics there. But as long as the more human beings can operate in bright lit situations, the greater work that can get done. And I can see society being shifted and twisted where those who try to achieve rest when there's work to be done and light available to do it might be looked down upon. And I could imagine so many people like myself walking around with like a haggard with bags under their eyes, constantly trying to push further and further, working, instead of a 6 hour day, it's 8 hours. No more, it's 10 hours. No, it's 12. Now it's 14 hours. Now it's a 16-hour day. Oh, you got to work even more. And even in today's standards, we have individuals that are like, if you're not working, if you're sleeping, you're dead. You must work harder and harder and push further. And I can see people collapsing. If you do collapse, foremen and other people who need you to work are like, what? Get out of here. We definitely could use somebody else other than yourself. So yeah, we'll find somebody else to replace you if you can't keep up. Sleep deprivation and maybe even could you imagine arcane light poisoning? I don't know. That I think that would just be awesome. People, visitors, the rich and famous coming from out of town, having uh, light bearers follow them around, or they are granted maybe an item or a gift or something of dancing lights that follows them everywhere they go to prove their wealth and their privilege. I think that would just be awesome. And of course, what does light do? Light dispels darkness, and so this dispelling of darkness also brings about a lack of fear. So maybe people in this community don't fear the darkness, and that fear is a natural element of survival. So also a city of light might also be a city of people who don't fear very much. Yeah. Oh, Egg of Death. Hey. So, Egg says, "Morning. Crime and punishment. Racial persecution against races that live in the dark." Yes. Yeah. And conversely, people people may escape to the dark to escape the persecution of the light bringers who are punishing those who live in the dark. Because um, to in our world, we have animals that are nocturnal, and we relate in many ways relate nocturnal activity to evil. Rats and bats and wolves and moles and owls and such. They're in the dark. It's a Black Panther. It's sneaking around in the dark. It must be up to something, right? And that imagery is kind of put together. Vampires don't summon white doves and sheep and rabbits. They summon and turn into wolves and snakes and bats and things of that nature. And so a lot of nocturnal activities are related to evil things, but maybe the darkness and nocturnal elements and moving around in the dark becomes the thing that's the savior of the people who are trying to escape an oppressive society. Now, of course, we're taking this and stretching it. Well, we're turning the volume way up. So it's not that this is real life, but it's like, oh, let's pull things from our own lives and take it into fantasy and twist it. Another thing that a good thing that can be twisted into bad in Dungeons and Dragons is something like the sanctuary spell. Okay, so I believe, and this is just an assumption on mine, that the sanctuary spell dramatically is to appear as if like um, a great hero who is faithful to the gods or something is besieged by great beasts or monsters, and they hold up their holy symbol, or they close their eyes and fall to their knees, or they brandish their symbol, and they pray to the gods that this beast will just pass them by, and or maybe they're covering a fallen ally who needs their help, and just by the grace of the gods, the evil beast snorts its foul breath on the back of their neck, and then the foul beast just steps over top of them and walks away. And that sounds like really amazing, like, wow, this is awesome. But the sanctuary spell could also be pretty nasty. I mean, imagine the sanctuary spell used as like public shunning. Like, you're in this community where maybe you've been stripped naked, you've been punished, you had to the public express all of your sins, and then you are, I don't know, touched, or sanctuary is cast upon you, and you try to run to people for help. Maybe you've been chained, or you've been injured or something. Maybe you're suffering, poisoned and bleeding to death or something. And people that fail their wisdom save just ignore you. They're just like, I don't see you. And in a social context, that's actually pretty harmful for people just to ignore who you are and what you are. And of course, according to sanctuary spell, if you take action against people of violence or something, they see you. So if you try to push people down or knock something over, they see you, and maybe they like smack you about the head or kick you in the butt, and then what happens? They just ignore you and walk away. And that might be like a public form of shunning or something. What else? Zones of truth. There might be those proctors or those inquisitors might place you into zones of truth to question you, and maybe some of the questions aren't exactly like, so how many times have you touched yourself in the last month? And be true to your answer, and then of course you're like, what is it? You could resist a zone of truth by not answering at all. Works unless the people standing around you with the spiked maces and the whips and stuff are just like, don't answer. See what's going to happen to you, right? So that would be pretty nasty and pretty embarrassing, especially if you have to do it in front of like friends and family, or important dignitaries or something like that. Mike's like, starting today, a lot, a lot. Egg of Death says, if you cease to exist, your worldly possessions could be confiscated. Ooh. People just rush by you, rush past you, and like start taking your stuff, talking about you behind your back, and you're like, I'm standing right here, and they're like, man, I sure with Bobby and Angela were here, but I don't know whatever happened to them. It's a shame that they were exiled. And like, no, I'm standing right here. And then like, Bobby or Angela pushes someone. They're like, oh, what? Smack, push, knock down the steps. Like, I'm taking this coffee pot. It's mine. Boy, I sure did love that Afghan. I get to take your stuff. Yeah, I mean, or maybe it's just you're taken out in the street and people just get to take your stuff and all your belongings and all the things that you work so hard for. Or maybe some of your belongings are taken out into the streets and burned in front of you while you are ignored as you walk around and such. It's pretty crazy. And even friends, family, loved ones, children, relatives just ignoring you. That's pretty. I think that's a pretty nasty thing. I even imagine even warriors or something going out to war and coming back injured and half dead and bleeding, and the religious leaders are there standing over top of them with their words of enlightenment, healing them and throwing them back into the grinder again. And all the warriors are like, "Please stop it! Stop healing us! I'm tired." You are not tired. Here, let me give you a word of guidance, right? Heck, even guidance might be a thing where numerically in like Dungeons and Dragons, guidance offers you a bonus on skill checks in a way bolstering your ability to do a thing, and without them you might feel lesser than you really are, from relying on them. And again, this turns where light isn't good. This might turn a lot of people to quote unquote the darkness. Michael says perhaps we follow the Judge Dredd idea and you're given one weapon, enough to survive shortly, and cast into the wilderness. Yep, you are no longer protected by our, by the one true, the blessings of the one true. And they're like, no. And cast out into the world. Yeah. And good excuse to be enveloped by the darkness itself. Also, they're being misguided about what to fear out in the darkness might be the thing that saves people. Like, for example, I, I don't know if this could actually happen, but maybe people find shelter in a cave of a bear hibernating or something, and the public is like, you can't go into a cave with a hibernating bear, and people are like, well, I can't survive out here. I need to find safety somewhere, and maybe they do, and then you find this becomes a trait where hiding in the darkness is sneaking around and having to steal food and find shelter and perform illicit acts becomes the only way to survive, i.e., becoming related to the ones who dwell in the darkness. And also, the light itself absolutely might be too dangerous. Like I was saying, the spells in Dungeons and Dragons are the ubiquitous versions. They are the basics. It is like magic missile is like magic missile 101. I'm sure somewhere out there, there's a more powerful, maybe singular version of that thing. But just like the light spell itself might morph and change into other arcane things if it is embraced by the community to do a thing. Like the light spell might turn into the blindness spell or morph into something that can be permanent and be so bright that it literally shows the bones inside your body and your beating heart or something like that. Perhaps Mike says, perhaps we follow. Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong one. Consider the survivors of the darkness. What happens if someone returns? What do they look like? Again, the uh, the drow effect might happen. We know that things and creatures that live out of the sunlight tend to turn more pale. Drow elves being dark skinned, and it's like, well, that genetically we're in a real life situation. We're like, that might not be a thing, but there could be darkness poisoning where, hey, it doesn't matter what race you are, but if you dwell within the pure darkness or total darkness or something, maybe you come back changed. You no longer have eyeballs anymore. You just have a blackness in your that's like oily and black in your eyes, or the flesh of your skin starts to change and move, and all of your arcane castings are changed by it or something. And for you, you're protected by it, but for others, maybe it spreads like a black pudding or something. Oh man, Mike continues on to say, is it a Game of Thrones undead situation, or is it like Mad Max and they're barbarians? Yeah, I don't know. And it could be any of those, as a matter of fact. And also something that you brought up before, Mike, might be a great idea for this, for our larger concept, and that is uh, fantasy magic in Dungeons and Dragons tends to be an on-off switch. There are no repercussions for using magic. You either do it or you don't. Yeah, yeah, like Mike says, or your eyes are milky white and you're light sensitive. Yeah. So I was thinking of two things. One would be maybe there's, and this is preliminary design, but and I'm going mechanical here, that maybe there's something called, simply known as the affliction. And so each of these regions that we're creating, like the one with worms and with light and with darkness, and we're going to go on down the line, that you a player character can get an affliction. Ooh, Darkwalkers. It's a good idea. Um, and an affliction might cost someone. It's like a give and take. You gain a benefit, but you also lose a benefit. And I thought an easy cost for getting an affliction, because you're going to get a bonus from it, would be the loss of your +2/+1 bonus to your character stats, unless of course in your game you're allowed to put +1/+1/+1 to your stats. But whatever the case might be, you lose 3 points from your stats, 2 and 1, whatever. Yes, you lose two and you lose one, by like character choice or DM choice or some confluence thereof, and then you gain some other benefit from it. And narratively, it might be because the character, no matter what racial type you're playing, dwells within this particular region. So if they came from the realm of bright light or something, maybe they're when light comes from their mouth and eyes when they use their powers, or to cut them is to show bright light coming out of them, or maybe their shadow, instead of having a shadow of darkness, their shadow is the opposite. They walk around with the shadow of light or something of that nature. And the same might be done for darkness, where they're, like you said, their eyes turn milky white, and maybe their fingertips are black, and then like a black, strange moving black tendrils like seem to writhe and turn up their arms and their elbows, like they have like completely like they're oil dipped skin or something. Yeah. uh, Egg says they are virtually blind in lower light levels. Yeah, yeah. Um, any racial type might be able to like pierce the darkness, or maybe they create a globe of darkness to make themselves feel better because there's too much light, and they're like, dude, the sun's going down. They're like, there's too much light on me, or whatever. Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. A great idea, and also, what a strange characters might have a strange set of bedfellows. Like, for example, the PCs might have allies or at least connections with real shadows and shadow demons. And because of their connection, having, I'm not going to call them allies, I'll just call them connections, or at least trade fellows, that other people are like, you should not be dealing with shadow demons at all. And the simple fact that you're having a simple conversation with them means that we will not deal with you in the least bit. And the PCs might learn about the actions of these people. It's like the individual who lives in a neighborhood who's best friendies with like drug dealers or criminals or organized crime or terrorists or something like that. It's like, do you say something or do you not? Are you associated simply because you live near them and they know who you are, you know who they are? Like, look, I don't snitch. I don't snitch on shadows and shadow demons or something. It may be that kind of relationship. And I think that's a really cool thing to play with, because on one hand, how cool would it be for, remember we had the discussion about coming up with the reason why your PC isn't available because you had to bow out of the game. Maybe your player character gets snatched away out of the jaws of death by a shadow demon, because they're your ally, and that's why hey guys, I can't make it. I got some schoolwork, and they called me in for a double shift at work, and then the shadow demon pulls you away, and you sink into a shadow and disappear, and all your allies, I mean, your so-called normies are like, dude, what the hell just happened? Like, I was pulled into the shadow plane. Mike says, I'm reticent to reduce ability scores as this affects every aspect of gameplay, like saves, skills, spell checks, etc. I'm more inclined to change sensory input or vulnerability, resistance, and such. Okay. I thought about that. I think that's why we don't have level drain anymore. And we don't really have too many monsters or effects that drain ability scores, but I sure do miss that stuff. I know it's math and everything, but yeah. Mike says, for instance, outcasts might become Morlocks. Ooh, kind of cool. Maybe a character I could see. I suppose you could do a trade off of your character is blind, and I'm going to put temporarily out there as in a character chooses that their character is now blind, but then the result of that is they have like blind sense, meaning like they're like Daredevil, where yeah, they can navigate the world, but they're still blind. So they can't see color, they see shapes, but they can't read anything. They can navigate their way through caverns and a lot of crowds, but maybe they can't see faces and they can't see colors, and there's just coins in their hands, but they can't tell the difference between the coins. Like that might be that's just an example of like playing with that with that trope of blindness and being blind. Or another thing I thought of was, I wonder if we could create micro wild um uh, um okay, there's the sorcerer of having wild magic, but I wonder if we could create micro lists for wild magic of different types of magic. And when I say a micro list, I'm talking like 3 or 4 options, or like a D6 roll. And you like at tier 1, there's like four cantrips on it that happen to you or that happen randomly that the DM gets to decide what happens. And then at tier 2, it's a first level spell. At tier 3, it's a second level spell. And at tier 4, it's a fourth level spell. But the PC has no control over it. So you make it like an arcana check or spellcasting check. And if you fail it, the DM decides what this thing is. So an example would be like, since we're talking about light and darkness, maybe what's the spell? And Mike, you've said this before. The black tendril spell, Hadar. My brain's not working right now, and I'm not going to look it up. Anyway, maybe the black tendril spell happens with at the point centered on where the PC is, stretching out from where the PC is, but the PC doesn't have control over the tendrils. They just become an obstacle in the battlefield, with the PC and their allies sitting in the middle of it, having to escape the black tendrils because their PC is a dark caster or something like that. Arms of Hadar and Hunger of Hadar. Though, yeah, the Hadar spells. Why did I? Duh. What's the spell with the Hadar in it? What are those spells again? I don't remember. Anyway, but you get my point, right? I wonder if you could just put a list of like, hey, if you if you fail a spell check. Why I say this is because if you're a martial if you are a martial character, we think of critical hits and critical fumbles. I roll a 20, I get a critical hit. I roll a 1, I get a crit fumble. But is it and Everett's Black Tentacles? Everett, that's another one. Um, but there's no corresponding. I don't under I understand why, but I also don't like the fact that every other die check with a D20 doesn't have the corresponding crit and fail attached to it. And I get it. Some people kind of go gonzo and a little bit ridiculous with the you crit fumbled, so you stabbed yourself in the back with a spear kind of dumb stuff. But I think it would be kind of cool to have if you are a illusionist, necromancer, pyromancer, like different spell class types. If you're a bard, a cleric, or something like that, like they'll have little categories. You roll a d6 on this table, and this is the thing that happens that's out of your control. You can either pick a couple spells, or you can have other random effects, like, oh, your cleric accidentally heals, some enemies or something, or your healing spell lingers in the region and has some other effect, or you are temporarily blinded by the light of the one true as you summon your healing spell, or something like that. Like, uh, I'm just spouting out random things, but I think it would be cool, and especially if we're going to do an overlay of this post-apocalyptic world with tools to use. I think it'd be kind of cool, although it could get out of hand because you could come up with so many spell casting types. But like, I don't know, a Tempest cleric summoning bolts of lightning and thunder that keep happening over and over again because they've summoned this massive storm, and maybe a strong wind comes by and they're like, I didn't call that. And they're like, yeah, you did. You called a storm and you don't have any control over it, or at least very little control over it temporarily or something. All right, getting back into the light and darkness idea as well. It's if you operate, stepping aside from dark vision for just a minute, if you operate in total darkness, then people's judgments and behaviors might not apply to the things that they see, but only to the things they feel. So, for example, maybe culturally, the people who live in these regions walk around or feel comfortable putting like a black headband on their eyes and fixing things, or being like a blacksmith with like a headband on their face, or I'm going to pick locks, and they pull the shroud down over their eyes and they do it by their feel, or they play music or something like that. Like they do things without judgments, and maybe beauty and appearance isn't as important to them. Maybe they are touchy feely because in the darkness it's the sounds they hear, the voices. Maybe they don't recognize faces, but your voice, they can hear in a crowd, like penguins, right? You get thousands of penguins together, but when they call to each other, those bonded pairs find each other in a crowd, and maybe it's very easy for them to like walk around in a crowd with everybody yelling and screaming, and they're like, "Oh, I know you, and I can hear your conversation, and you, and I know you." Um, yeah. Mike says maybe it acts like the wild magic barbarian. Okay, 8 possible results, all local. Instead of summoning things like flumps, it swarms of worms, a morlock, a region of tentacles, or minor fiends. And listen, I I get Dungeons and Dragons has a legacy of ridiculousness. Flumps being an example of them, and the wild magic barbarian having that associated with it. But I always felt like thematically, like the wild magic sorcerer and the barbarian, I wished they made other themes that fit more into the theme of what they're trying to be. Like if your character is okay, people love warlocks. If your character has a warlock patron of the Raven Queen, that if you have a wild magic effect linked to it, it should all be related to like the Raven Queen, right? Like I get a wild magic barbarian, but I feel like all of the effects should be barbarian related, not summoning flumps, maybe summoning things like will-o-wisps or something, like something crazy that like has this wild deleterious effect in the region, maybe summoning ghosts or elementals or something. I don't know. That's just me. I agree, like with what we are creating, the idea that if you come from the region of worms and leeches and and, and slugs, that your wild magic summons those things. Of course it should. Of course it should. Um, I don't know. I that's just me. I think if you come from the realm of worms and you cast a healing spell, maybe I don't know, rest your hands over someone, or you vomit up leeches that that attach to their wounds and heal them, but it's pretty nasty. I think something like that with far more narrative and creepy and cool. Mike says, now I'm hearing outcast wail like Banshee. Ooh. Ooh, terrifying to civilized regions, but it's communication to outcasts. Like coyotes, the sound of their screams are used in stories to scare children. Wow. Could you imagine? So maybe the banshees and the banshee scream, the wail, comes from, could you imagine that being the origin of the pain? You came from the city of light and you've been tortured for 101 days as every at the light of at the light of the sun, you're being tortured, your wounds being healed and tortured over again until the wails just become unbearable and they kick you out. And now the banshees are like they're almost, they are both in pain but also symbols of the society where, yeah, in the distance, travelers, caravans and travelers hear the wail of the banshees and they know not to go there, but the outcasts are like, they get close, and maybe just for a small moment they're able to bring some form of peace or attrition or something to the banshees to resist the wail that the banshees have. Maybe they offer them gifts, or maybe this strange enveloping of darkness around the banshees keeps them from screaming so much, and the outcasts are like allies of them, and they're able to pass by the banshees, and just for a moment the banshees get peace, and then all of a sudden they start their wails again. That'd be kind of strange but kind of cool as well. Very awesome. Maybe the banshees are kept quiet through willing ritualistic nature of placing them in these small hovels of darkness, of pure darkness, never letting the light come in under the door or something. And people one by one, hour upon hour, come inside and enshroud the place in darkness to keep the banshees quiet. But if they're ever attacked, the banshees are let loose. Because the banshees, while they can't communicate naturally, everyone knows that they are their loved ones feeling all that pain, and that banshees are like, they're almost like, I want to scream at my enemies, and they go out there, yeah, I love it. A new outcast, terrified in the darkness, wails in despair and is answered all around her. Fast forward a few months, and she's running in a pack of blind outcasts. Yep. How awesome. Almost, maybe they almost operate like bats or like sonar, because they can hear the wail, and the wail bounces and reverbs off of things in the region, and the blind outcast can like hear the wail of the banshee, and they navigate that way. Wow. And they bring captured enemies to the banshee itself, just to hear the wail, to either be punished by hearing the pain, like, if, hey, listen, this is what you did, you're gonna hear what she has to say. Ooh, Banshee might be the name of the outcast. Yeah, why the hell not? Heck, what a great way to describe a, a character bardic class, but instead of like poetry or singing or strumming on a musical instrument, it's literally like screams. It's getting into a crowd and just like screaming so like loud in pain. Like you could just see the tendrils in the neck screaming and stuff, the eyes bulging out all red and bloodshot and stuff. And that's how their bardic powers work. Like maybe bardic inspiration is literally the opposite of inspiration. It's don't listen to what I have to say. It's remember the screams that I had and run. And when you remember those screams, it's like, yeah, that's exactly what you should be afraid of. And so they are inspired by the fears and the pain of their ally to do the thing, so they're better at avoiding the dangers. Like, it's like, my whoever their friend is or something like that. Like, I can't believe the pain and suffering they went through. I don't want to go through that. And of course they are never surprised by, they roll the dice, use my bardic inspiration. Aha! I'm not surprised by the trolls that poke around the corner, or something like that. Yep. Egg of Death says a group of outcasts called banshees and play on the associated fear. Oh, absolutely. Like, for example, and this goes back to I forget the name of the title of the episode. It was like 5 ways to reskin monsters or something. Maybe the locals just call everybody out there banshees, and player characters who are unfamiliar are like, oh, "You mean undead banshees?" And they're like, yeah, I guess they're undead. Yeah, they're banshees. Their wails and screams are a thing, and you could layer this on a lot of stuff, for example, a Medusa that doesn't operate by seeing her and turning to stone. Maybe a Medusa's petrification works by hearing her screams. So it's not by closing your eyes and avoiding it, it's by holding your ears. And maybe the Medusa doesn't have snakes, you've reskinned it, so it's whatever. You get my point. It's a reskin, a reframing of the capabilities of a thing that's out there, you know. Mike says, so you were talking about gain or loss of becoming an outcast, like blind, you gain echolocation, become light sensitive, resistant to thunder damage. Right, right. Powerful banshees can scream loud enough to crack stone. Yeah. And again, this might be, I'm thinking of, I don't know how the word I have is affliction, meaning like on one, like maybe I don't know, this might be too harsh, but maybe a character is mute and so they can't speak, but when they do speak, they have a scream that cracks stone, right? Like that might be the trade-off. And so to speak, maybe they use forms of like sign language or body language or like a what would be an equivalent Morse code or something. Maybe they can't, or maybe they can't. They're not mute, but logistically they can't communicate. Their voice is so shredded, no one can hear what they have to say, or people can't. Oh, what's the movie? Fight Club. Uh, uh, um, Fight Club. The Pikers. Brad Pitt. No one can understand what he's saying, but he's talking. Oh wow, yeah. Michael says, "Okay, not outcast. They're afflicted." Well, no. Two separate things. But yes, but no, but yes. um, the I guess I'm conflating two separate things. I'm thinking of player options that are really cool narratively. They have a narrative story, but also a thing that has a cost to have the thing. Like, wouldn't it be cool if my fighter was afflicted because they were cast out of this region? Like, imagine a paladin that fights for the light and goodness, and they realize that how corrupt their society is. They get outcast to these people, and they become, maybe the paladin is punished for some perceived crime and they become the afflicted, and now they now have that scream inside of them, and they are now running with these outcasts or something. Like I'm imagining a narrative thing that could be layered on top of a player character and then removed, and maybe they're afflicted again, or maybe a player character is like, no, I'm always from this region, I always have worms inside of my body. When you cut me open, strange worms or maggots come out of my skin, and it gives me this ability to do a thing, right? Anyway, that's hey, M squared. M squared's like, I thought we did Dune 2 weeks ago, talking about the voice. Use the voice to ask for a cup of water. Yeah, with word. Yep. Michael Maron's like, with words that can crack stone. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, technically, we're talking about light and darkness, but I it flowed into this about a good region of light bringers that torture people by slicing their flesh open and breaking their bones and then healing them over and over again, like breaking and healing and harming and healing, and how goodly magics could be twisted and turned into something very evil. And they talked about screaming and banshees. They communicate via taps on stone or scratching noises. Ooh, that could be. I'm liking that. That's a great language, because maybe that is a language unto itself with other beings who may or may not even be humanoid that do the same exact thing. Michael says, within the light, is it a military dictatorship or a fanatic theocracy? What creates the fear of the dark? I'm going to say one, either, both, maybe. Um, especially if we're allowing people to have dials to tune in what they want. I think it makes perfect sense to, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Uh, People being afraid of the dark is a natural thing. Maybe there really is a natural fear of the dark and the dark things that are out there, but the protection of the light turns dark into it in of itself, and it does this reflection back into the darkness, which forces people out of the darkness back into the light, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Oh man, Mike says making you're making me think of the ghoul fly again. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, like, maybe, could you imagine an afflicted player character afflicted by these ghoul flies that you had made, maybe not necessarily exactly how you have them in your world of Thol or Ember, but that's what I'm thinking of. Like, it's a thing that's overlaid on a player character that has a thing but also suffers a drawback that's mechanical, although there could be sizable narrative drawbacks to a thing as well. Having having leeches under your skin, or having, darkness, oily darkness inside of your body, or having your shadow look like instead of darkness, your shadow is this pathway of light, or a human shaped form of light. Other people might notice what the hell's going on. Also, the the idea of being cast out. We know fallen angels, and there's also stories of the goodly knight being cast out. What if? Okay, I'm going to segue slightly. I don't like going 0 to 60 on anything in role playing games, and I think one of the dumb things that I personally say is dumb is the idea of, if you break your oath as a paladin or you break your oath as a cleric. Usually, this happens with paladins, but this goes on to other character classes where it's like, oh, you don't follow the tenets of your religion or your warlock patron or your paladin oath. You lose all your abilities, and I'm like, don't do that. Don't don't do the I'm punishing you by taking away all your stats, right? All your character abilities. What I think would be cool is to flip those abilities. So a paladin that breaks their oath, instead of having powers of light, might start to slowly get dark powers of darkness. And so as a cleric, maybe as a DM, every time they keep breaking their vows or whatever the case might be, you just go, oh, you don't one of your spell slots, you cannot pick the light spell, but you do have the darkness spell. You're like, that's not in my repertoire. You're like, it is now, and little by little, maybe that paladin, quote unquote, falls from light into darkness, but come to find out, it's just the flip side of a coin. It's not good or evil. It's just that the fallen side of light are these other individuals or divinity or avatars of darkness that are like, yeah, we're not evil. We're just the opposite of them. And they've been punishing us since we fell from the get go. And all we did is make our own choices. Yeah. Um, let's see. I'll get to you there, Princess B. Mike says Thol has a force of paladins who are the faces. They wear silver androgynous masks that remove their identity. Ooh, I like that. Do the leaders in this world wear something similar? Hoods, masks, illusions? Removing identity is a great way to remove your responsibility, your moral and or ethical responsibilities. That's an easy fix. So yeah. All right, Princess B, I'm gonna read your comment because it won't completely show up here, but thanks for being a co-host here. Princess says, I always like the AD&D Planescape conception of the forces of good and evil. The forces of evil are massive and overwhelming and at war with each other to define the nature of evil in the multiverse. The forces of good are relatively tiny. They would be easily overwhelmed if they were focused on. So they play at the edges and try to keep this war going for as long as possible, so as to keep the darkness from engulfing them. And in this concept, by the way, if you guys don't understand all the things that we're coming up with, and I need to warn you that I am trying to develop an RPG product which involves all of these concepts. I actually have the document open right now, and using these concepts are ways for us to change and twist them. And it could be that the safety of the world of light in this whether they're like city states or regions or whatever, has been keeping the darkness at bay for this long. And come to find out that the light has been sowing seeds into the darkness on purpose, keeping the fight going on, because evil would, if the evil forces got to combine together and actually organize, they would overwhelm everything. And I like that in Planescape. I got my Planescape book sitting right over here. Yeah, yeah. I like this Princess B. Well, technically, I know some people were like, fifth edition should do Planescape, but Planescape actually already exists. I reordered through RPG the print version of Planescape. I got it on digital too, and so it already exists. You can still play it right today, but I get people want the mechanical features of it, but Planescape is really cool. Oh my goodness, I almost wish I could do a whole series on going through Planescape and the lore of it and stuff like that. There's a bunch of settings I wish I could do that, but that's not an hour show. That's like 50 plus hours plus more. Mike says, yeah, I changed the oath abilities too. Fiends and such take notice and begin to corrupt the abilities. Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Oh, I feel like it's a better story without punishing players, that if they break their oaths and things, that narratively it makes sense that other forces will try to draw them in. And instead of removing a player's ability, you just little by little start flipping it over to something else. Like, oh, hey, Paladin, you now have darkness as one of your spells, or you have burning hands as one of your spells, or something like that. And they're like, really? That's cool. And you look at them like, that's not actually cool. you really don't want that, but go ahead and play with that. That's the whole point, to be led into it. Princess B says the AD&D Planescape books are masterpieces. In my opinion, the best campaign setting books ever written. Any 5e adaptation would be a pale imitation. Perfection cannot be improved upon. You should say what you really mean. I don't think you were clear. No. I absolutely agree with you. And honestly, I really do. How do I explain it? Some of the nuance in it really, it also brings to mind the physical representation of the alignments and why alignment matters for Planescape, right? And Planescape actually proves the exception, that human beings don't fall readily into one alignment or the other. Whereas because I like the idea that alignment is a real thing, and at the exact same time, player characters don't fall into neat little organizations of alignment, and that human beings vacillate between the borders, and they kind of like this Venn diagram of like, I'm kind of lawful neutral, but I'm also kind of lawful evil sometimes, but kind of neutral good sometimes, like just flowing back and forth. Whereas in Planescape, they're like, yeah, no, no, you need to pick a spot. I love it. And actually, I think in Planescape, there is a narrative reason for you to be able to travel from one plane of existence to another, from one alignment assigned plane to another, and the actual para alignment regions in between, and travel from one to another with keys and things like that. Michael Marin says, if you're a fiend and you trade heavily in souls, you're going to want that fallen paladin soul to complete your collection. It'll look good as a trophy. Yeah. Oh, hells yes. Yeah, you're going to want them to play with your toys and stuff. Could you imagine being braggadocious down in like the 9 hells? You're like, yeah. I listen, you see that paladin casting that darkness spell and their burning hand spell, like, ooh, wait, they're using a fireball? Sweet. I got him. 2 more and I got him, right? They're giving pit fiends are giving each other high fives, smacking each other in the ass, like, great job. I thought so myself. Mike Gould says, so the dark regions each need their own villain, like banshees as blind screamers. Yeah, exactly. Wormlings are the infected. black claws or lycanthropes, the fleshless skeletons fully devoured by worms, the unmade, what else did he say? Yeah, unmade freed constructs. Oh, I was thinking of all that. Hell yeah. Oh, hell's yes. Um, and I get that this is a weirdism when it comes to RPG content, but re- we love ourselves some monster books. But you know that I'm very much into reskinning something. Like, okay, imagine, I don't know if they would be undead. Imagine a skeletal humanoid. So they're a skeleton, but their body is nothing but worms or maggots and all kind of creepy things. So you know, maybe they wear a cloak, or it doesn't matter. Anyway, and they have little fleshy things falling from their skin. You could very easily say, well, I'm going to make that a troll, but you know, maybe they also have the undead tag or something like that. And that would be a very easy thing to write into a script, into RPG content. Like, oh, what are the wormling people or something? Well, you know, give a description. Their body's a skeleton. They're held alive. They're almost like a hive creation where worms are falling from their body, and if you strike them, the worms like spew out onto the battlefield, but then they crawl back onto their body again, and maybe it causes some kind of like battlefield effect where you have like these worms sitting. It doesn't matter, but the whole idea might be to not reprint the troll stat block. But then people might go, well, why didn't you just put the stat block into the book so I don't have to flip? But on the other hand, you might save page count because you're just reprinting things that have already reprinted. Sorry, it's a, it is a dilemma by creators for a thing, right? Like in your book, do you put down the stats for bandits and thugs and barbarians or gladiators, or do you just reference them into another book and save yourself a page count, which ups the price, ups word count, you know, the whole thing? And people fall on either side of that blade. Like, okay, do you just reprint everything so I don't need to flip a book, or do you just give a reference because it's a waste of page space? And we've seen complaints about on both sides. All right, back into getting segueing back into our discussion of what Mike was saying about we need villains for each region. The concept I have in my head is that the person who picks up this development can make the regions, they can have as many regions as they want. They can have one wormy region or 1,000 wormy regions with details that they incorporate the way they want to, how they want to. And it might not be one big bad, it might be a number of big bads, using 6 as our rule in here. Because in my head, I have this mantra of fireball mind fuel. I don't think that's going to be put on the book, but the FBBF, a fireball mind fuel, a bunch of D6s, roll them, very easily create what you want, put the player characters in that situation, you're done. That's what's in my head. Mike says, wormlings I see as cannibalistic types who struggle with worm control. Black claws are those who willingly become infected so that the worms cannot eat them. Everything is a reaction to the world. I like the idea of reflecting, having it's the action reaction idea that everyone's the hero of their own story, and if you live in these blasted nasty regions after the fall of society and the fall of magic or whatever the case might be, that everyone survived their own way, but everybody from the outside is like, ooh, you survived that way? Damn. Ooh. You know, I mean, spreading a lycanthropic infection to other people might not seem like a good idea unless you're the person who survived that way, right? You know, maybe there's a ritual to when a child comes of age, I don't know, age 12 or something like that, they become the new afflicted, or maybe it's in their blood and it's the first time that they run with the pack, werewolves, right? And they run with the pack and they transform as their first transformation, and they go wild, and the other family members guide them, a la White Wolf's, you know, a werewolf game or something of that nature. Whereas everyone else is like, you You literally are like willingly letting your kids transform into a werewolf. Like, what the hell's going on with you guys? You're evil. As the Lightbringers once again torture one of their own with their 37th flesh flaying, um, in the public, and then healing the person's wounds again because they didn't tell the truth in the zone of truth or something. Michael Marin says D&D has the worm that walks, or the spawn of Chisis. Yeah, it sure does. Very similar worm humanoid monsters. And as you say, they're not core monsters, but expansion monsters. And I bet you're going to mention a comment that I'm going to mention. Like Mike Gould says, right, spawn of Chisis is the ideal creature for this world. I was thinking the fleshless are animated skeletons of creatures fully devoured, humanoids, giants, beasts, etc. Also, the other thing when it comes to producing what you guys don't know, before we get out of here, this is a little behind the scenes thing. There is an OGL and the SRD. The OGL is, of course, the open gaming license, and the SRD is the system reference document. Whenever you produce RPG content, you must follow the OGL, the open gaming license. The open gaming license states that you cannot use any materials outside of the SRD, which is the system reference document. And you can download the system reference document for free. The system reference document doesn't mention any named creatures. Spawn of Chisis. I looked it up. Snail flails. Flail snails, excuse me. Snail flail. Flail snails are not in there. There is only one feat, the grappling feat, I believe. There's only one background, the acolyte background. So you cannot, and there's only the base classes, and there are only the base subclasses or archetypes. So the reason why some other creators create monsters for their world that are similar but not the exact version of the other thing is because they can't use them, right? It's legally they can't use them. I cannot create a product that uses a beholder, and I could get sued trying to skirt around it by calling them. It's not a beholder. It's a multi-eyed stalker. It's called the eye stalker. Yeah, they're going to be like, yeah, it's a beholder. You can get sued. Now, I'm not saying people haven't done it and broken the OGL. I'm saying that by law, today, a month from now, 5 years from now, they can come back and sue you and say, oh, all that money you made off of that product, not only should you give it to us, but you damaged our brand. You also need, and they can punish you further with that. So, yeah. Yeah, but Michael says the SRD is why I homebrew a stack of monsters. That's exactly why you have to do it. Now, if you take I could take a troll and rename it like we were talking about, like the concept of being a skeletal thing and having worms on it, and I can rename it, and in my whatever concept I'm thinking of. But yeah, you can't you can't use anything that's not in the SRD, and that's every WotC product that's out there that exists. So you can't use like Volo's Guide. You can't use Cobalt Press. I mean, well, technically you could use like, which would be a violation. But if you use other people's third party products, they don't have an OGL. So you're literally stealing their material. So yeah, you can't do that. It's a strange thing. Let's see. Mike Marin says, I only homebrew monsters now, turn them into mini tactical puzzles. I thought what would be cool was to make a book of puzzle monsters. Like you said, like tactical puzzle, conditional problem creating, like a book of monsters that do nothing but create situational obstacle problems that PCs need to navigate around to stop the thing that's happening to them. And we could do a whole episode of like some of our greatest tactical puzzle monsters. And yeah, I don't know. Oops. I saw a comment, but I'm going to go up here now. Princess B says, I wish WotC had gone more the Paizo route. Basically, use whatever you want, just don't use proper nouns. By the way, here's a website with the entire content of the core rule books, every monster, every player option available for free. Well, they did that during 3.x. It's, that sounds good for the consumer. That's not necessarily a protection of the brand. And that sounds good until you create what you want and I abuse your creation. I get it, but no, that's not. Honestly, that's not really a good idea. The fact that they have an OGL and an SRD in the first place, I think, is a good medium because you got to protect the brand. It's not. I mean, listen, I would love it, but you're going to have people who. There's always someone out there who abuses it for everybody else. There's always somebody that walks into a store without shoes and a shirt on enough times that you can't. There's no service, no shoes, no shirt, no service. Right. The few ruin it for everybody else, and I guess that's why they did it that way. Mike says, example, I don't use mind flayers. I use Vespidroy or Wasp Lords. I don't eat your brains, bro. I inject eggs in your body and use you as a host. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, they're in out of the box encounter. The out of the box encounters. Just look up out of the box encounters. Nerdarchy. Where's the, I'll get the link. I guess. Yeah, Princess B. It's just protecting the brand, and I know people don't like to talk business when it comes to business because we think, oh, it's the hobby, everything should be free and open and the best, but you have to reimburse the people who are doing the work, and the best way to reimburse somebody is to pay them, and the second way to reimburse them is to spread their content in the best way it should be available to people. So yeah. My M squared says, I was born out of having an all-known wizard party. Very squishy, very magical combat, requires different monsters. I'd love to see an episode on tactical puzzles, fights that need tactical thinking. For me, I'm a fan of like most of the oozes, like the Medusa, where you have to tactically worry about not, viewing her. The Rust Monster, oh, you can't hit it with a metal weapon. How do we avoid that? Monsters that swallow people, monsters that teleport, monsters that create their own dangers. And I'm about stacking monsters. Hey, you struck the zombie that's infected with something and it releases an ooze out of its stomach. So now you just created two enemies for yourself. Bravo, their enemy or something. I spill oil onto the zombies. Great. They're both on fire and now they're a hazard to you on fire. They still attack you. What? It's that kind of thing. Yeah, like Mike says, it's because people snipe content and then call it their own. Yeah, plagiarism, theft, easy. Yeah, and that's why I'm the self-appointed third pillarist of the tabletop RPG community. At least we have the environment to futz around with because it's so unused that I feel like it's the niche that I get to play. I at least get to play around with where no one's going to like challenge me on it. Princess B says tactical puzzle fights are pretty simple to set up. The basics of the big trick is that every encounter should have an environmental hazard, something players can play around. Yep, environmental hazards are as critical as monsters in a fight, and it could be something. An environmental hazard could be something simple. Classic barroom fight. There's tables and chairs. Maybe there's a bar in the corner or against one wall. There's a catwalk, stairs and a catwalk around the upper floors. Boom, easy. You have height differences. You have objects used as improvised weaponry. By the way, if you read the improvisation rules, improvised weapons don't do 1d4 damage. Or rather, they don't only do 1d4 damage. But maybe other things could be used as cover. They can be used as weapons. They're tripping and falling. There's bottles that might be able to, you smash people over the head and light them on fire. There's hey, I want to do a shove maneuver. Okay, you shove them over the balcony. Like, that's just off the top of my head. And that's one of those classic barroom fights. Heights, distances, drowning, hot, cold, burning, freezing, acids, and whatever. You could go on and on and on and on with that kind of stuff. Yeah, I can go too far with it, to be honest with you. But so, yeah, B, Princess B, we're same same page. Oh man. M squared says their first boss was an undead fragile wizard with a plot magic shield. Okay. Held aloft by oozes. They needed to engineer a way to get their one melee guy to float over the oozes to whack him. Yeah. Yeah. I love that stuff. And I love put the onus of the danger on the players, right? Like the wizard is in the middle of I don't know, on a dais surrounded by lava, and there's rope bridges that go over to the main dais where the wizard's there casting spells. Do you go across the rope bridge? I don't know. That's up to you. Right? Like if you put the onus on the PCs, let them put themselves in danger. That way, it all you do is create problems. That's all you need to do, and let them come up with solutions. Michael says, true on the environment. Even a chunk of high ground and full cover or concealment can shut down ranged spell lobbing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And listen, if your PCs don't use the environment, let your NPCs use it. Right? Simply fighting in a rock-strewn valley might mean that the player characters being attacked by gnolls can't target and see all the gnolls that are around them. Well, how many gnolls are there? You don't know. You see 6, but you hear lots of voices. You hear them yipping and barking at each other, but you can't see them all. Some are behind full cover. Well, I'm going to use a magic missile spell on the 6 you can see. Oh, that's right. I have to target them. Yep. And the ranger and rogue are like, I'm going to go around the full cover and attack them from behind or blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. Cleric says, I'm going to heal them. Spell says you need to be able to see them. Damn it. I didn't think about that. Right. Those are little things that go where you could change the dynamic of a battle by doing a thing to make a thing. Right. Pack tactics. Pack tactics are dangerous for PCs. If PCs figure a way to split up the pack of whatever pack tactics are being used against them, sure, why not? My favorite improvised weapon in the PHB is a dead kobold. Are you holding one of those dead kobolds on your hip next to your pocket gnome? Oh man. Yeah, Mike Gould says some of the best encounters have irregular terrain levels, ramps, walkways, falling objects, barriers. Yep. Nothing like having the possibility of an avalanche for that person who loves to use their Thunderwave spell, right? Princess B says there's a style of play that every DM starts at as a beginner called Monster in a Room, Trap in a Hallway. Yep. And it is the simplest form of encounter design with monsters in what is basically a blank featureless room. When environmental hazards come out, that is when I know I am dealing with at least an intermediate skill level DM and not a beginner. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it's the trap in a hallway, monster in a room. Once you blend the two, then you're like, wait, oh yeah. Maybe they're classic dungeon room, right? Squares on the floor, be careful where you step, monster in room. Monster chases PCs around room. PC must run across squares on floor. Stepping on particular squares causes the thing to happen, right? Do you stay still or do you run? Do you move or not? Is the monster adapted to the region where it's like flames don't hurt the creatures burning? Or maybe the PCs lead the monsters from one room into this room who then burn ogres or something being chased around the room, step on a thing, fire shoots up, whatever the case might be. Something falls out the ceiling, whatever. Like just being able to use and abuse all that. I love that kind of stuff. Somebody's trying to break my encounter design. Okay. M Square says, fighting those gnolls. If the melee guy chases even the one closest gnoll he can see, you know he's got to get ambushed by the pack. Oh, hell yeah. And here's the other thing. If you don't tell your players how many gnolls there are, don't tell anybody. This is one of the rules we came up with on how to fudge dice. In other words, don't fudge the dice at all. You just fudge you manipulate the encounter rather than fudging the die rolls. So you guys see 6 gnolls standing up on the tall rocks in this rocky valley, and there's cover behind them. You hear more gnolls out there. How many are there? You don't know. I'm melee character. I'm going to run around and chase them or whatever and take out the one gnoll that's running away. Okay. You turn the corner and DM thinks in their head, which would make this a really cool session. They're an 8th level barbarian, plus they have 2 levels of fighter, plus I don't know, whatever bullshit. There's 8 gnolls. That's what and they're going to have 2 wargs with them or something, right? Like in your head, or the PCs are about to die. Okay, it's 2 gnolls and a dire wolf, but they're scouts. They really don't want to fight. Like mentally thinking in your head. You don't say this to your players, but anyway, that's yeah. You get it. Mike's like, I'm fully equipped. Pocket halfling, spare gnome, dead kobold. Ching ching ching. Underslung goblin. Got the montage of getting ready for battle. Picking up the dead kobold and sticking it on the side. The spare gnome is like, hey buddy, what the? Fold in half, stick in pocket. Yeah. There was an old joke in Dragon Magazine. You walk into a 10 by 10 room with an orc guarding a chest. Yeah, yawn. What? Yeah. Oh man. Anyway, guys, I got to get out of here because we got to do the thing to get rid of the thing. I got to head off to work. But love to have you here. We're going to talk about light and darkness the rest of the week. Yeah, there's more to the conversation than you think of, but I love coming up with being sparked by an idea and then going, there's more to this, and then talking openly with you guys, and then everything else. So thank you there, Em. Appreciate all of you being here. We are a tight knit but loyal group. So I want to give back to you guys. So I can guarantee you that the development of this, your name's going to be in it. You're going to get writing credit. We'll figure out a way of PDFs are easy. I can shoot you guys that in a minute. Getting you physical copies, we'll figure that out. If I have to pay it out of pocket, I probably will. I don't care where you live. It's expensive to send it overseas, but whatever. It's a small price to pay. But I also want to let you guys see some of the bad stuff that happens when it comes to producing an RPG product. As a matter of fact, I'll probably even let you see some of the background in terms of like earning potential, how money is because I don't care what you see. It's not really that. It's not as private as you think it should be. But like through Drive-Thru RPG, how do you get paid? How do you divide percentages? What are your sales like, and things of that nature, and show you that kind of stuff from behind the scenes. By the way, it's not what you think it is. It's very extremely difficult to get rich and have a lifestyle writing RPG products. It's very few people that can do it. Very, very few. Ride shiny. Ride eternal, shiny and wormless. There are no worms up inside of me. Look at my orifices. There's no worms inside me. Pretty nasty. Guys, have a great one. I will see thee later.